Welcome to the Mischief. I'm Vallen, and this is Better with Mods. Today I'm going to be covering the Cauldron as well as the Bellows. Now that's not entirely a true statement. I will be covering a few other small things, but those are the main topics for this little bit by bit. Is going to be the Cauldron as well as how to make it a stoked cauldron. But before that, let's actually get into a little something here that I neglected to mention previously, is that if you have a broken wooden gearbox, because your windmill may have broken in the rain or something like that, you didn't have a wind chime on it, you can actually take your wooden gearbox and you can put it in a crafting table with some wooden gears and repair it so that it's a little bit cheaper. Or you can just take two wooden gears and right-click on a broken wooden gearbox. Ta-da! Automatically fixed. So that's a really quick way of fixing things. Should that be needed? Not that it should be. But anyway, there you go. Now you know about that. So last episode, I did talk about the use of a saw. I didn't really go too much into how to make a saw because it required a cauldron, which is what I'm going to be covering today. So this is why I've kind of got this in place. This is an example item for basically the recipe is requiring a leather belt. The leather belt is the key here because in order to make this type of leather, I'm going to call it cured leather in this case, you're going to need leather straps, which is also going to be made from cut leather, which is going to be made from tanned leather, which can be made in a cauldron from scoured leather. So how do you do all this stuff? You start off with some kind of millstone setup, whether it be manual, as I have in this case, or automated, as I had in previous videos there. You get yourself some scoured leather eventually over time, and then the use of that, you combine it with some shears and you can get some scoured leather, or you can just toss it right into a cauldron and then shear it afterwards. So at this point, I'm just going to toss it in as is. But the idea here is that you're going to need some other materials, namely either dung, which you can get from wolves, or some kind of bark. And bark can only be picked up in a few specific ways, one of which is with a saw. But if you're making a saw, then that's going to be a little bit difficult. The other way is going to be running around and hand cutting with an axe. When not in creative, hand cutting the tree stumps with an axe. As you see here, it does take a bit of time in order to get this accomplished, but then once you've completed it, and I recommend you choose birch because it's the cheapest recipe, you should get at least one of the birch bark plus some sawdust, and that should get you started at least, if you're to run around chopping those. But alternately, you can make something else, and that is stump remover. Recipe for this is a mushroom, rotten flesh, and a creeper oyster, which you get from shearing creepers, which makes them non-explosive. And you can get two of those stump removers. So if you have a stump remover, then you just right-click on a stump, and it will do exactly the same thing instantly. So there's no time spent, or wasted in this case, getting those ingredients. So now I have a couple birch barks, which if you look, the recipe for this rotates. As you can see here, oak requires 5, spruce is 3, acacia is 8, bloodwood is 8, birch is 2, jungle bark is 4, and so on. So it'll vary a little bit. Spruce is probably your next best bet, just so that if you're involved in trying to save some time on this. But you then take these and pop them in a cauldron, which a cauldron in this case is made from some iron ingots, which yes, that's rather expensive in Better with Mods because each one represents 9 iron ore, so that's a lot, plus a water bucket and bone will get you a cauldron. Now if you look here, I have a cauldron that is non-functional. Even though it has stuff in it, that's just a representation that there is something inside. You see a potato here, there's potatoes, it has a recipe option here, you can click on it and you can scroll through the different recipes. It's very handy, but over lava sources it does not work, so that's not a valid thing. You will have to use either on top of netherrack or hibachis. Hibachis I will show but not go over how to make them in this episode. Now a cauldron, as you see here, has the floating skull in it and so on. That is merely a representation on how full all of the slots are inside. For instance, if I close this, it then drops all the way down to the bottom, taking up only one slot. Then if I just kind of max it out, it looks like it's almost ready to overflow. So you can actually customize this as you would like, so that you can have your cauldron looking a bit more, aesthetic if you so desire. But on the outside, it works really well. So a cauldron with netherrack lit underneath it is your basic model. allow me to grab some potatoes. In this case, I'll just grab a stack, throw it in here. And you can see it's not going to cook the ones that are already in it, but it will slowly, over time, start cooking some other foods, or any other recipes that you see here will be cooked standard very, very slowly, as you can see here. But it is for free. There is no cost in actually cooking and smelting these items. So that is somewhat of a benefit. You'll probably want to go out for the day, though, and work on some other projects if this is the process you're going for. Alternately, you can actually do a 3x3 square underneath the cauldron, and you can speed things along greatly. Allow me to grab another stack of potatoes. You saw before, it took a while, and it actually goes along faster than your vanilla furnace. And this is for free, all at the cost of just some fire being lit on netherrack. So it's pretty good. Or other fire sources, per se. If you have other fire options down below, it should still work in most cases. Now, you can see it's just ripping through the potatoes at this point. It's doing good work. Now, there is another variant of a cauldron, and I'm going to go over this. It's a little bit more advanced, and I'm not showing you all the items on how to make that. Actually, here, let me put these items here. We're going to put the birch bark in and the scoured leather, because the recipe for this, if you look here in a cauldron, will make tanned leather, which then we can use for making the belts and things like that for the saw. And the reason that I'm showing you all this is because you're going to need it for making a bellows. But this here is a cauldron, and it's a stoked cauldron. Reason being, if I flick this switch, if it has blue flame going underneath it, being bellowed by this bellows, or whatever, you know, it then becomes a stoked cauldron if it has a blue flame underneath it. So, by turning that off, it will eventually turn back into a regular flame and start making that. The reason I show you this is because they are two different recipes. So if I look at the recipe list for a cauldron, you can see there's 14 pages of all sorts of really cool things, mostly food, but then there's some other things like your leathers and stuff. And if you go to a stoked cauldron over here, it will then turn things differently. So if I put in here, let's grab some potatoes, for example. And you know, it's the 3x3 setup right now. It will actually start cooking the potatoes as it normally would because it is a cauldron with regular orange flames. Now if I take something like rotten flesh, that changes things up. Put this in here and it actually will still continue cooking the potatoes because they are a valid recipe for a regular cauldron. But if this gets stoked, it will stop that. Reason being is because potatoes do not cook in a stoked cauldron, but rotten flesh does. And you can start seeing that the rotten flesh takes 10 at a time and will start making tallow. And of course, the same thing applies. If you have one flame underneath the cauldron, whether it be stoked or otherwise, it will go slow. If you have multiples, it will go much faster. And you can see I only have one bellows, and it is turning all of these flames into a stoked flame. Well, a bellows is actually created a little bit more complex of a manner. Of course, requires a lot of leather belts and stuff, but it all does require planks and siding. Now you can see why I was showing you that you need to have a saw in order to progress with your cauldron into a stoked cauldron. So, if we go back over here, there we go. Our scoured leather is still not done yet because it was cooking the potatoes instead. So if I put those in afterwards, it should then work. But there we go, our tanned leather, which the uses for this can be very great. You can make leather pants. Wait a minute, I already have leather pants. Look at this, they're the same armor and everything. Why do I want the other tan leather pants? Because you can make twice as much that lasts twice as long. If you look here, leather pants, 2 armor for either one, right? The durability on this one is 75. Durability on tanned leather pants is 150. Plus, the recipe for tan leather pants is using tan leather or cut tan leather. So you can vary that and make yourself basically quadruple the durability's worth of regular leather pants, as an example. Just a little something to see there, that as you progress and start making these different tools and objects, your ability to make better and longer lasting and more useful items becomes apparent. You are less restrained with the things that you can access because you can then, well, make better stuff. Now, a bellows. Let's cover this real briefly before I show you my little setup over there. A bellows needs to be powered by some sort of axle. In this case, I have one set up, and if I use this, it'll automatically start pumping it. Reason being, let's say I break this. Okay, you see this? Nothing is happening. All that happens is that when a bellows is powered by an axle, is it will just it will deflate and shoot air out the front in a small area. So you're going to need to actually, let's see if I can grab another lever here, put this next to it, nothing happens, right? Reason being, you need to actually have a redstone signal being pulsed to that. So if I were to put down this, reconnect it, I have it set up to automatically go on a loop right now. So it'll go around, it will then give a signal to the comparator and so on. I also slowed it down with a couple of the redstone repeaters because otherwise it just goes incredibly fast and is very loud and noisy. But in this case, it is just constantly inflating and deflating, inflating and deflating. So it's a good setup. Then by doing this, I'm giving it a constant redstone signal and stopping the loop. Turning that off, it will continue again. So, why am I showing you this? Reason being is that it has multiple properties besides just turning a flame into a stoked flame on a hibachi. It will also work with moving items around. So let me actually do this. I'll take all these items here. We have a few key items to start with, like your feathers, your dusts, and paper. Those are considered lightweight. Then you've got like medium weight things like ground up materials, seeds, and hemp. And then you've got your heavy stuff, iron ore, gold ingots, chest plates and stuff, everything else that's unidentified. Those will all be your standard stuff. Now I'm standing on this right now, so it's going to kind of want to glitch me out a little bit. But I'm going to try and toss these things down. And you'll start seeing that over time these things will start getting pushed away unless I miss where I'm throwing this. There we go. I can just throw all these things down, and you can see that they're actually, if I'm not throwing them on top of the the bellows itself, they are getting pushed, but into 3 different categories, and slowly over time. They will only get pushed 1 block at a time, but then as they get blown, each one, as you can see, the lightweight, the medium weight, and the heavyweight items will only get blown so far away from the block. So this can be used as some kind of pushing mechanic or mechanism as you desire, dependent upon the weight of the items that are being, sorted. So you could feasibly have hoppers over here going into 3 different inventory types for the 3 different weights, or whatever else you wanted to set up. Now, with that in mind, let's move back over here and you can actually see a setup that I have. I have this powered with a water wheel, of course, because it's probably the most compact one that I could use, and it's in the overworld, so why not? It's not going to break in a rainstorm like some of the other stuff. Now I have a redstone signal powering hibachis, which the reason I'm not showing you today is hibachis are made with concentrated hellfire and heating elements. Those are going to be a different beast altogether because it's going to be using filtered hoppers and such. I will cover that in a future bit by bit. But for now, just know that I just have that redstone circle going on over here. Nothing really too fancy with that comparator and a redstone repeater just kind of sending the signal in. It could just be another piece of redstone if I wanted. But that's so that I can set the delay on this. So you can just set it to be slower or faster if you want. I found that about this speed is pretty good for me. And this is constantly giving it power. But it's not doing anything because remember, we have to have a redstone pulse in order to pump this bellows constantly up and down. And of course I've got redstone going up here and it accesses underneath. Therefore it is going to constantly keep pumping and giving a bellows effect to that flame, which covers, if you notice, a much bigger area than just 1 block. So you don't have to have the bellows right next to a hibachi flame in order to create a stoked effect. So that's just a little something that I hope will help you guys out. And turn this off. Wait a few seconds for the blue flame to turn back into orange flame, and you can have your stoked cauldron turn back into a regular one and cook up your dinners as you so desire. That being said, there are some wonderful dinners in here. You can make flour, of course, in a millstone and stuff. Which then you can combine with sugar to make donuts. You can, of course, there's practical items as well, but you can turn cactus into cactus green. Some of the other foods that are in here. Let's see, you've got your chowder and your chicken soup. A lot of the bold foods will actually stack. Whereas like your traditional vanilla Minecraft mushroom stew never stacked. It would just be like 1 bowl at a time. This stuff does. You will get the wooden bowl back as well, and you can get a really good amount. So like 1 carrot, 1 flour, 1 some kind of cooked meat, 1 baked potato, 5 bowls and 3 mushrooms. will get you 5 hearty stews, which is extremely saturating and very healthy for you, of course. Among other things, I mean, you've got some really good other recipes. It doesn't have to be stews as well. There are other options at hand. I mean, you can just go with your standard meats and so on. But you've got your kebabs, and of course, your raw scrambled eggs being cooked into other scrambled eggs and so on. But you can always just toss a bunch of stuff in here. If you don't have a lot of netherrack or a lot of options around a space around your cauldron, you can always just put one in there, throw in a whole bunch of stuff, and it should cook it all together. So in this case, you could feasibly put items like this in here. I have 5 carrots, 5 flour, 20 bowls, 15 mushrooms, and 5 baked potatoes. And this will slowly over time start cooking into a hearty stew. If I add in the last ingredient, some kind of meat, whether it be raw or cooked or otherwise, in this case, let's just take 5 steak and I'll add that in, and you can see it will start cooking up and it will use up these ingredients, and you'll get about 20, remember it's the number of bowls that you'll get back, hearty stews, which you can see here are quite nice. So there you have it, a little bit of cooking magic for you and your own home in Better with Mods. So don't forget that this is not the full Better with Mods experience. I am just showing you the basic stuff. The full Better with Mods experience requires a lot more mods and it to go into a hardcore version. And by hardcore, I don't mean one life to live. I just mean that's the status of this. I'll be striving to try and put together a small mod pack that just has these mods sometime soon, and I'll be putting up a notice on there so that you guys can actually play the Better with Mods in the way that it was originally intended. So, if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to give a like, comment, subscribe, and as always, be sure to spread the mischief to others if you think that they'll enjoy this kind of content too. Don't forget, if you want to support the mischief, you can always check out the description below. And until next time, folks, I'll see ya.